Washington. That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
We're not going to make any revisions to it. The only question is what redactions will be made.
This idea that Nunes could be charged with obstruction is facially absurd. They're expanding the definition of crimes like obstruction.
So we know that Hillary Clinton goes to run for president, and she's got the full weight and strength and power of the U.S. government behind her.
The collusion is right in front of our eyes.
And she's still lost.
As attorneys, we have an obligation to try to be objective, and it doesn't mean that you have to like the president or dislike the president, but we have a service to the public.
I find it obscene, the phrase chain migration.
Chain migration has to be stopped.
Chain migration.
Chain migration.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this brand new broadcast of Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name. It's great to have you in the conversation. We're going to dig in to what's going on with the FBI memo, what's going on with the guilty plea that Michael Flynn offered. Major questions now about how his case was handled. I think there's a possibility that Susan Rice actually invented a meeting that never took place in order to cover her whatever and that of President Obama, James Comey, and several other high-ranking Obama officials. So we'll talk about that as the program develops. Now, before we jump into all of that, we're going to turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in the book of Job. And Job has some majestic poetry. It's extremely well written, put together, very high literary quality to this book. And it was written by a guy by the name of Job, or somebody who was familiar with him and intimate with him and his friends and family. And of course, as we've been talking about, it deals with the problem of evil and suffering in the world. This is a perplexing problem for mankind from the very beginning. You know, and I've contended you can't really understand or deal with the problem of evil in the world because the question is always put, why does a good God allow suffering? Well, you have to factor in human free will. You can't leave that out of the equation because God has created man with genuine, honest-to-goodness free will. We are free moral agents. He's given us the power to choose, and that power can be used for good purposes, and that power can be used for evil purposes. And God doesn't stop people right before they make an evil choice. That's part of giving us genuine free will. He allows us to exercise our free will, and then he says, look, I'm going to expect you to live with the consequences of your decisions, and that can lead to a lot of suffering. But that's God, the way he's made us as free moral agents, and we wouldn't like God if he did it any other way. We would be very, very upset if God turned us into some kind of robots, and he hasn't. Now, there's also another factor in the whole issue of evil and suffering in the world, and that is you have to take into account God's sovereign purposes. God may have purposes for allowing suffering that we don't understand anything about. We may not understand until we've had some kind of perspective, till we're looking back on a segment of our life. I know for myself, all the stuff that God has needed to purge from my life in my life, he's had to beat it out of me. In other words, I was a slow learner, stubborn, hard-headed, And there's stuff that I needed to release, I needed to let go of, I needed to change, and I just wouldn't do it. So God allowed me to suffer. I mean, I experienced pain, and through that, I realized, look, I got to accept some realities here that I've been kind of resisting. So everything that I needed to get purged from my life, God had to beat it out of me, and I'm grateful for every one of those beatings that I took, because whatever I am today, those are the things that helped turn me into whatever traces of maturity, spiritual maturity I have today. So you have to include that into the mix. Now, when we come to Job 20 and 21, which is where we are, Job gets into a conversation with a guy by the name of Zophar, who's one of these phony friends that he had. And Zophar says, look, people who are wicked have always suffered. That's the consequence of being wicked. You suffer. And Job, you're trying to ignore that. So you're suffering, so therefore you got to be an evil person, and you're concealing your sin from us. He says, do you not know, in chapter 20, do you not know this, from of old, since man was placed on the earth, that the exalting of the wicked is short, the joy of the godless is but for a moment. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he says, he will be in distress, verse 22. The hand of everyone in misery will come against him. And here he says in verse 27, the heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The possessions of his house will be carried away, dragged off in the day of God's wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the heritage decreed for him by God. So he says, Job, what we learn is that the heavens will reveal the iniquity of a man who claims he is righteous, but is in reality wicked. And one of the ways his iniquity is revealed is that the possessions of his house will be carried away and dragged off in the day of God's wrath. This is the decree of God. This has happened to you. Your possessions have been dragged off. Your children are dead. This is heaven's way of revealing to us all that you are a man of wickedness. And Job replies in chapter 21, look, you guys have not been paying attention. There are a lot of wicked people that are prospering. In fact, they live their whole life prosperous. They die prosperous. They die in peace. They die with their families around them. And if you guys haven't recognized that, you have to get out more. He says this in verse 7, why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? He says, I've seen it. They live, they grow mighty in power. Their offspring are established in their presence, their descendants before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear. No rod of God is upon them. They spend their days in prosperity, and in peace they go down to Sheol. They say to God, depart from us. They have no interest in the things of God, no use for God. In fact, they reject him. Depart from us. We do not desire the knowledge of your ways. What is the Almighty, that we should serve him? And what profit do we get if we pray to him? He says, behold, is not their prosperity in their hand? In contrast to what you hoopleheads are saying is going to happen to the wicked. And he says, look, you have to get out a little bit more. Have you not asked those who travel the roads? And do you not accept their testimony that the evil man is spared in the day of calamity, that he is rescued in the day of wrath? How then will you comfort me with empty nothings? There is nothing left of your answers but falsehood. Now, of course, what we're not told is what happens to these prosperous. They die in peace, and then they go to Sheol, and we're not told what happens to them after they get there. Now, that's the other part of the story. That's a conversation for another day. And I remember hearing a story about a professor, and this touches the problem of evil and suffering and all that. I remember a story about a college professor who was a believer, strong believer, and he actually he was denied tenure, and he was fired at this prestigious university because of his faith in God. And of course, that was painful. And he's walking with a friend of his that night, and the friend asked him, well, listen, how do you feel about the people that persecuted you and robbed you of this position? Do you feel bad? Do you feel angry? What do you feel? And he says, I'm at peace. And his friend says, well, why are you at peace? He says, because I have known God and they have not. When we come back, we're going to pray some of these concepts back to God on the other side of this break. You are listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. Come right back and we'll pray these things back to God. Stay with us.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome, Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. God ordained the marital union to be a living, breathing illustration of Christ's relationship with his bride. Ephesians 5 lays it out in great detail. A relationship where all of the flaws, faults, warts, and scars are known, yet the love commitment thrives. You won't see this in romantic comedies because, frankly, Hollywood types have no idea what biblical love is. The marital union is a glorious institution characterized by passionate commitment and mutual humility, where spouses esteem one another more highly than themselves. Marriage is more than a relationship, it's ministry.
Visit the Hamilton Corner on the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Again, we've been talking about the problem of evil and Job pointing out to his friends, look, wicked people do prosper and succeed, and they die in peace with their family surrounding them. Doesn't always work out like you guys are saying it should. And so he has a dialogue with his friends who stick to their story, and Job sticks to his. They can't put a finger on anything, any sin that he committed. And so he is defending himself. He says, look, in this situation, and we saw that God's on his side. Job doesn't know it yet because God hasn't revealed this to him. But God said, look, my servant Job is upright and blameless, turns away from evil and turns toward me. And yet still, Job said, I suffer, and he did not understand it. Well, let's go to prayer. Lord God, we accept what your word teaches about the destiny of those who reject you. And we pray that your spirit will sweep across this land and make many aware of their end apart from you. Teach us all that the joy of the godless lasts only for a moment. Though evil may be sweet in their mouth, we know that in time it will be turned in their stomach to the venom of cobras. May they see that even the profit of their trading will in the end give them no enjoyment. In your time the heavens will reveal their iniquity, and the possession of their houses will be carried away. This we know is their portion from you, the heritage that you have decreed for them. Because of this, Lord, we pray that the counsel of the wicked will be far from us all. We affirm together that your word is true, even though it seems as though the wicked in fact live and reach old age and grow mighty in power, while the righteous suffer without cause as they seek to be blameless before you. We see many in our land who say to you, depart from us, and who do not desire the knowledge of your ways. They show no reverence for you and make no effort to serve you. They see no profit in prayer. And yet it seems as though prosperity is in their hand, and that their lamp is not put out. No calamity seems to come upon them. They die in full vigor, wholly at ease and secure. We pray that you will open their eyes to see their eternal destiny apart from you. and to see the futility of depending upon riches or anything else instead of upon you. We pray that by the work of your Spirit, our nation will return to seek you and draw near to you. I pray that we all will desire the knowledge of your ways and give ourselves to serve you. We believe, Lord, that you will hear our prayers and that you will release life and strength to us in return. This we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. David's got a similar psalm, Psalm 73, where he wrestles with basically the same, with exactly the same issue. Now, just going to lead off with normally what is a Friday story, but I just couldn't resist. This is rooted in the fact that in Kansas, there's no age limit on the people who can run for governor. And so there are like a half a dozen teenagers that have declared for the office of governor of Kansas. One of them started it, and then a whole bunch of them piled on. So now the legislature's getting together, put their heads together, see if they can come up with some kind of age limit for being able to run for governor. But right now there isn't one. Well, here's the guy says, I'm going to push the envelope. And he entered Angus P. Woolley in the race for governor of Kansas. Now, Angus P. Woolley is a 3-year-old wire-haired Vizsla. It's a dog.
Viz.
And the Secretary of State said, nope, dog can be man's best friend, but it cannot be the governor of Kansas. So his owner had to regretfully take his name off of the ballot. The director of elections for the Secretary of State, the guy's a real party pooper. A dog will not be allowed to file and put his name on the ballot. That's heartless, if you ask me. That's cruel. That's cruelty to animals, and I thought we were against that kind of stuff. Just, wreck this dog's dreams for the rest of his life. Now, this is what the dog's Facebook page said. If Angus was allowed to run, he would have promised citizens, quote, soft couches, Tempur-Pedic beds, free-for-life universal chuck-it ball supplies, and a completely anti-squirrel agenda. Now, if he'd won, he was going to appoint his siblings, Babe and Max, as lieutenant governor and secretary of state, respectively. That's why Chris Kobach took his name off the ballot, because he's the secretary of state. I'm not going to let some dog take my job. You can't run for governor. Woolley said he believed his pup would have been a great governor. This is the guy that owns him. I do believe he is a caring, nurturing individual who cares about the best for humanity and all creatures other than squirrels.
Wow.
Other than squirrels.
Other than squirrels.
Yeah.
Okay.
He'd have to allocate some money for more fire hydrants. So
for what?
More fire hydrants.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, I really think that if the dog had filled out that paperwork himself, he might have a really shot at beating that.
Oh, if he could do it himself, yeah.
If he had filled out all that himself,
yeah,
or run his Facebook
I mean, look
page.
at how everybody turns out for the groundhog every year in February, too. You get that many people to turn out for a squirrel hunting dog.
Didn't you do a story on a cat that was a mayor somewhere?
Yeah, we've done a story on that. And then we had a story about a cat that was like a resident in this library. And then the new librarian came in and said, we got to kick the cat out of the library, and the entire town revolted. 600 people signed a petition. You can't make that poor cat homeless. He's a resident of the library, so they got him back in his lodgings. All right.
I bet people are saying, "Boy, I'm glad I tuned in right now."
That's right.
Yeah.
What can you say?
How many people? Now, I challenge you. You may be thinking what Jeff is thinking, but how many of you would have known that a dog wanted to run for the governor of Kansas if you didn't have your radio dialed right?
You don't see that on CNN.
No, you're not gonna get that on Fox News. No.
We regularly chase squirrels around here, but very rarely do we chase gubernatorial dogs.
That's right.
You know,
we live them.
This is a biggie day. This is a big one.
Yeah, because they could bite. Those dogs running for governor could bite. Now, I want to jump into some information on this FBI fracas in D.C. that's got, they're taking aim at Donald Trump. That's their ultimate target, to undo his presidency, to unseat him, to delegitimize his presidency. He's the real goal. But in the meantime, they got like Michael Flynn got caught up in their trap. He had to resign basically in disgrace, and He resigned. He pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI and basically had to do it. He probably is not even guilty. That's what I want to get to right out of the chute. Michael Flynn probably didn't do anything wrong, probably not even guilty. But he was being bled dry trying to defend himself against probably what was a bogus charge. And so finally he just threw in the towel. He said, look, I'm innocent. I could keep fighting to protect my innocence, but I will lose everything that I own. I will have nothing for my family. I will be bankrupt and penniless because I'm going up against the resources of Robert Mueller and the unlimited pocket, the deep pockets of the federal government. He had the entire federal government coming after him. He says, I can't do it. I don't have enough money to take on and to resist and to fight the entire federal government. So he pleaded guilty and is now out of public service. And with a guilty plea like that, probably never going to be in public service again. But I want to get you caught up to speed on some of the information that has to do with what the FBI has been doing there. And some of this has to do with what I think is some misconduct on the part of the FBI, and I think some misconduct on the part of Robert Mueller. We got this one other thing. There was a email that Susan Rice wrote on January, the day of the inauguration, January 20th or 21st, whatever day that was. She wrote an email, a memo to herself, which is odd to begin with. It's the same day that Trump is inaugurated, so it's the last day that she can write stuff and have it be official Obama administration stuff. If she waits until after he's sworn in and the ceremony's all over, it's going to be too late then. So if she was going to do anything, it was hinky, she had to do it right then. And she wrote about this meeting that took place on January 5th, where in attendance at this January 5th meeting, James Comey was present, Barack Obama was present, Sally Yates was present, and a couple of other high-ranking Obama administration people were present, including James Comey. Now, this is where it got James Comey in trouble. And here's what all of the news stories have been saying. I got a slightly different take I'm going to suggest here. No idea if I'm right. I'm the only one that's suggesting this, but I think somebody needs to look in to this. FBI Director James Comey, he was reporting that he reported that he'd had only 2 private conversations with Barack Obama, one of them in late December of 2016, just to say goodbye. That's the last conversation with Barack Obama that he recorded and reported. And now he's in trouble because you have Susan Rice, who was the departing, I guess, ambassador to the UN or something like that. She's reporting that no, James Comey was in a conversation with President Obama in January 5th of 2017. And so Comey's now in trouble because it looks like he lied to Congress. You know, and lying to Congress, that's a crime, like lying to the FBI. And so maybe he ought to be where Michael Flynn is. Now, what Susan Rice said in this email, said in this memo, is the purpose of this meeting in January 5, the purpose of this meeting was that President Obama wanted to tell us that we had to be sure in dealing with this whole FBI thing and this Trump investigation and the Trump-Russia collusion, we had to be careful and we had to be sure that we did everything by the book. So that was the heart and the nugget of this memo. So James Comey, according to Susan Rice, heard President Obama said, we got to do everything by the book. And, you know, so naturally the question that people ask is, well, what were they doing before?
Oh, I was thinking you were going to say which book are they using, Rules for Radicals?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. But, you know, if President Obama has to tell them, look, you got to do things on this one, you got to do it by the book, what were they doing on other stuff? Now, here's the thing that I wonder. Because the topic of that January 5, 2017 meeting was potential Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, Barack Obama supposedly said, you got to do everything on this deal. You got to do it by the book. Now, here is the question I've got. I wonder, honestly, if this January 5th meeting actually took place. I wonder if Susan Rice didn't make the whole thing up to try to provide cover for Comey and especially for Barack Obama. I'll explain why when we get back.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. This month, Americans celebrate on President's Day the birthdays of the country's two greatest presidents, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Washington, the wealthy Southern plantation owner, and Lincoln, the log cabin-born, Midwestern, self-made son of the soil. They came from starkly differing backgrounds and life experiences, and yet they literally shaped America into the nation it ultimately became. No other presidents have been as formative in inspiring and molding both the American national character and its form of government, not to mention the presidential office itself. George Washington was indeed the father of the country. He guided the newborn nation successfully through its first great crisis, the Revolution. Overwhelmingly popular as a national hero, having led the Continental Army to victory over the modern world's first superpower, Great Britain, Washington spurned offers to become a monarch and refused to shackle the newly created American presidency with the titles, preferments, and prerogatives of European monarchy. Most historians believe that Washington's greatest gift to his country was to impose upon himself a voluntary two-term limit on presidential service, relinquishing political power and returning to private life at Mount Vernon. This extraordinary, virtually unprecedented, voluntary surrender of political power bequeathed a tradition of the restraint of executive power in the federal government that has served the nation well now for more than 2 centuries. King George III is reported to have said when he heard that Washington had stepped away from power after 2 terms, quote, "Then Washington is truly a great man," end quote. Almost all Americans would agree he helped us forge government of the people, by the people, and for the people. More about this tomorrow. For more information about Southern Evangelical Seminary, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Again, this email that Susan Rice wrote to herself on January 20th, 2017, might have been 15 minutes after he took office that she wrote this email. That's the timestamp on it. Apparently his oath was taken right about noon. But she might have still felt like she could sneak this under the or over the transom and still have it count as official Barack Obama administration business. But Comey had said prior to this that he had only met with Obama twice, once in 2015 and another to say goodbye in late 2016. He told this on June 8, 2017 to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. I spoke alone with President Obama twice in person, 2015, 2016. Now, maybe Comey's defense is, well, I was talking about the times I spoke with him in private, alone. Now, this January 5th meeting, I didn't include that because there were a whole bunch of other people there. That's possible explanation for that. But here is what I think may be going on. I think that perhaps Susan Rice, trying to cover President Obama because she was beginning to suspect that people were going to raise suspicions about this whole Trump-Russia collusion narrative, that the FBI was getting surveillance warrants on false information, that this Steele dossier was made up of entirely fabricated stuff, and it was going to make the Obama administration look bad, make them look like they were cheating, make it look like they were lying, which they were, make it look like they were cutting corners, and that would make President Obama, as the chief guy in the administration, make him look bad. So Susan Rice said, I know what I'll do. I'll go back in time. I will pretend that a meeting took place in the Oval Office on January 5th, that I was there and President Obama was there and James Comey was there and whoever else was in the meeting. I'll pretend that they were all there, and that I will put down that Barack Obama read us the Riot Act. He said, I don't want anybody cutting corners on this deal. I don't want anybody fudging anything. I don't want anybody bending the rules. This thing has got to be by the book. So Susan Rice would be protecting him in case these questions about whether they were straight arrows on this investigation or not. Now, that's just my theory. I'm not suggesting it as a theory. I'm suggesting it as a possibility, because it strikes me that James Comey is not liable to overlook a meeting with President Obama. They're just not likely to do that. As the director of the FBI, he's a lawman. He knows how important those records are and how important it is to be thorough with all of that stuff. You know, and then there's also questions, and Andy McCarthy writes about this at length. Again, I've seen a number of stories about James Comey maybe being less than honest. So this is going to be interesting to me. Because if James Comey, if there was no January 5th meeting, and James Comey didn't, if there was a January 5th meeting, and James Comey did not say anything about it, then he's guilty of misleading Congress. He's guilty of lying to Congress. That could get him in big trouble. Now, if James Comey was not present at that January 5th meeting because there was no January 5th meeting, that's what I'm wondering about, then Comey is in a really bad spot. Because if he comes forward with the truth that there was, in fact, no January 5th meeting, then he's ratting out Susan Rice, exposing her as a fabricator, and raising questions about how this whole administration was conducting business. So that will be interesting to see. I mean, she writes this thing at the last possible minute while she still can, and have this thing be counted as some kind of Obama administration era missive. So anyway,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm eager to see if anybody. I haven't heard anybody else even suspect that. Maybe that's a result of my fevered imagination. But Andy McCarthy writes about the curious Michael Flynn guilty plea, and I want to talk a little bit about that. By the way, the American people overwhelmingly believe that President Obama improperly surveilled the Trump campaign. This is an Investor's Business Daily TIPP poll. A clear majority of 55% believe that it is, quote, likely that the Obama administration improperly surveilled the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. 31% of Democrats think this. 55% of independents. 54% of the American public want a special counsel to investigate whether the FBI and Department of Justice improperly surveilled the Trump campaign. And 44% of Democrats want that as well. A just released Rasmussen poll, 50% of Americans believe it's at least somewhat likely senior federal law enforcement officials broke the law in an effort to prevent Donald Trump from winning the presidency. 50%. You know, you wonder why President Trump's approval numbers are coming up. Highest they've been in 9 months today, 40% approve, or 47% approve, 47% disapprove. I think part of it is people everywhere are starting to realize, look, there was something way hinky with that Obama administration. And we think they were out to get Donald Trump. It's looking evident to us that this was a coup d'etat that they were trying to launch from the White House. Now, James Comey, this is another interesting thing. James Comey told lawmakers that he did not believe that Michael Flynn had lied to them. FBI agents who interviewed General Michael Flynn, that would include Peter Strzok. Peter Strzok was the guy that did the interview. Remember, he's the guy that hated Trump, wanted him gone. He was the one that interviewed Flynn. Remember, they kind of ambushed him. He thought they were coming over for a collegial consultation because he was in the administration by then. Instead, they came over and sandbagged him, conducted an interview with him, and it's probably the DOJ probably had a tape recording of his phone conversations with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. And they probably compared what he said in these phone calls to Kislyak that maybe Michael Flynn didn't even know about. I don't know how much he knew about whether he was being caught up in this surveillance. Remember, the foreign surveillance that allows you to surveil a foreign figure like Sergei Kislyak, and if you happen to catch an American citizen in that communication, you have to conceal their identity. You can only unmask their identity if you can demonstrate that there's a national security issue involved. Now, maybe they could convince them that Michael Flynn, that this is an important national security phone conversation, and maybe they caught him in some kind of minor inconsistency in what he said to Peter Strzok and the FBI and what he had told Sergei Kislyak. Now, it was not improper at all for Michael Flynn. He was the national security advisor. Was not improper for him in any way to talk to the ambassador of a foreign country. That's what you expect somebody in his position to do, to cultivate contacts and relationships with other diplomats and other leaders of other countries. There's nothing improper or suspicious about that whatsoever. Now, apparently, Vice President Pence came to believe that Michael Flynn had lied to him about what he had told. Wouldn't even been improper for Michael Flynn to talk about sanctions, because that was the thing that Vice President Pence said he lied to me about. He lied to me when he said we never talked about sanctions, but he might have, and maybe that's on the phone conversations, and it would not have been inappropriate or improper for Michael Flynn to talk to the Russian ambassador about sanctions. Would have been perfectly fine, perfectly on limits. But maybe Michael Flynn thought, oops, maybe that wasn't something I was supposed to talk about, and so he concealed it from Peter Strzok, and so they caught him in that minor inconsistency, looked like a lie, so they dinged him on it, and he's gone out of the administration. But it wouldn't have been inappropriate or illegal for him to talk with the ambassador about that thing. And Comey said, look, even the FBI guys that interviewed him, they said they don't believe that he misled them, don't believe that he lied to them. So the question starts to come up is, did Michael Flynn actually do anything wrong? It's a given that there's nothing wrong with him talking to the Russian ambassador, discussing sanctions with him. So the FBI even said they found no wrongdoing. The Washington Post even reported on this, that there was no wrongdoing in Flynn's conversations with Ambassador Kislyak, that the FBI, Washington Post reported. FBI looked at it, said there wasn't anything inappropriate here. So the question is, why would Flynn lie to the FBI? This is Powerline blog, John Hinderaker. Maybe he didn't. FBI Director James Comey went to Capitol Hill in March to brief lawmakers privately. That is when he told them that FBI agents who interviewed Flynn did not believe Flynn had lied or that any inaccuracies in Flynn's answers were intentional. So the question is, well, what happened? The answer apparently has a lot to do with Sally Yates, the disgraced former acting attorney general and Obama holdover, who was later fired for insubordination. Remember, Trump issued this travel ban, and she said, I am not going to implement, even though that was her job. Trump was her boss, had every right in the world to tell her, I need you to implement this, and she just refused to do it. Trump had no choice but to fire her. But Sally Yates was the one that promoted this theory that Flynn had violated the Logan Act and therefore might be subject to blackmail by the Russians. Now, the Logan Act is an act that nobody has ever been prosecuted under. Nobody's ever been convicted under. It goes clear back to like 1798. And nobody has gone to jail for this thing. I think only twice has it ever been used in some kind of a case to prosecute. Never got a conviction. So it's an obscure piece of legislation that prohibits an American citizen from intervening with a foreign government on behalf of the United States. Well, Michael Flynn, at no point in this whole charade, was an ordinary American citizen. Either he was the director of the National Security Advisor, or he was about to become one as a part of the incoming Trump administration. So Sally Yates cooked this thing up, apparently, maybe to provide some cover for accusing Michael Flynn of lying. But it's entirely possible that Flynn never told a lie to anybody. James Comey said he didn't. But remember, when he was prosecuted by Mueller, everybody who would know about this stuff was gone. Comey was gone. Sally Yates had been fired. Susan Rice had hit the highway. Comey is out of there. Barack Obama's not going to talk to anybody. So there was nobody left that knew that Comey had told them all that Flynn never lied. So Mueller prosecuted him, and it wasn't even for...
The book of Revelation is the greatest manual for what it means to be an overcoming Christian you will ever find. If you want to be victorious and get in on the victory that Christ has already wrought at the cross, the book of Revelation outlines various steps for those who will overcome.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Jeremiah 20 verse 9 says, "His word was in my heart like a burning fire." Hi, this is Alex McFarland, co-host of Exploring the Word. You know, I was in my second year of college as a new believer when God put in my heart an insatiable desire to read His Word, and that daily reading of God's Word has shaped who I am. And every day on Exploring the Word, Bert Harper and I teach the Word so that fire and love for Scripture will be in your heart as well.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
8 Days of Hope started after Hurricane Katrina, and we were blown away by the devastation that we saw on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and down in New Orleans. And then this past year when we went to Houston, 8 Days of Hope, our rapid response team, we stayed for almost 7 weeks. We had never seen hundreds of thousands of families waiting for somebody to come and help them. And now you get a chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus. March 10th to March 24th, 8 Days of Hope is going to do its first ever back-to-back trip. 8 Days of Hope, 14 and 15. It's free. All you have to do is get to Houston. We provide the food and lodging, a couple great-looking T-shirts. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who know how to work with their hands, and maybe they do this for a living. We're also looking for people that are less skilled, but are still looking to be a part of something way bigger than just themselves. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com. Come be a part of the largest rebuilding trip ever planned by 8 Days of Hope. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call if you want to jump in on this conversation about the hinky stuff going on, what I think was hinky stuff going on in the Obama administration. I know Andy McCarthy thinks that Bob Mueller, a lot of other guys, Trey Gowdy thinks he's a straight shooter. I do not. I think Bob Mueller is bent. I think Bob Mueller had no reason to prosecute Michael Flynn other than he has to get a scalp. Remember, he's not investigating a crime. There is no crime. He's supposed to be investigating supposed collusion between Trump and Russia. But there is no collusion, and that's not even a crime. Even if he did collude with somebody, that's not a crime. And so I think Bob Mueller was in a place, look, I'm going to spend millions of dollars of the American people's money, and I can already tell that we got nothing on Trump. We've been poking around, this bush for 2 years now. We got bupkis. We got nothing. But I'm spending millions of dollars. I got 17 of the most high-priced attorneys in Washington, D.C. that I'm paying $500-600 an hour to be a part of my team. I got to come up with a scalp. And so he found somebody that he thought he could take advantage of, Michael Flynn. He has limited resources. He's not going to be able to pay for a defense attorney after what I'm going to do to him. So I think Bob Mueller went after him without cause. Bob Mueller, I would think, would have to know that James Comey had told everybody that Flynn didn't lie to anybody. He really had no basis to go after Michael Flynn. But he did. And the number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. If you want to join the conversation about all of this, I don't know what you think about, my hypothesis. It's just a suggestion about Susan Rice inventing this meeting, if she did, to try to provide cover for Barack Obama, which is where her primary loyalty was. She wanted to try to cover his trail so nobody would plausibly be able to accuse him of participating in this, of turning a blind eye to anything, because they can always say, well, look, it's right here in the official Obama administration records, in the log of that meeting, that Barack Obama told us all, you got to, quote, do everything by the book on this one. So it'd be a way of covering for Barack Obama. So I'm wondering if that meeting ever took place. If it didn't, then she got James Comey in a whole lot of hot water, because he would be accused then plausibly of misleading Congress by saying that he only had 2 conversations with President Obama and this one wasn't one of them. You know, when Sally Yates keeps coming up, Sally Yates was the acting FBI director on January 24th when she sent Peter Strzok over to interview Michael Flynn. She was the acting director of the FBI at that point, because he hadn't designated Jeff Sessions for that position. And so she's in charge here, and she's a bad actor in this whole deal. I believe her motives are highly suspect right from day one. So it looked like she was trying to set some kind of a trap for Michael Flynn from the beginning. Maybe she told Peter Strzok, look, I want you to listen to that tape of his conversations with the Russian ambassador. Then I want you to go in and surprise him. I want you to ambush him. Don't let him know you're coming. Don't let him know this is a formal interview. Just go in there like you're buds, like this is just a get acquainted meeting. And I want you to start asking him questions about that Kislyak. And if there's any discrepancy, I want you to make note of that he lied or he misled. That's what I want you to do. Well, you know, Peter Strzok said, hey, I went in and talked to him, and he didn't lie. It wasn't until Bob Mueller took over that there was any suspicion that Michael Flynn lied to the FBI. He lied to Mike Pence, but that's not a crime. And he paid for that crime, if he did in fact lie to Mike Pence, by being cashiered. He's gone, so he suffered his penalty. But no accusation, no suspicion that he lied to the FBI until Bob Mueller prosecuted him for it, because I think Bob Mueller had to get a scalp, and he got George Papadopoulos and Michael Flynn. I mean, these are nothings. These are about as insignificant a pair of scalps as you could possibly get. So it might have been Bob Mueller desperate to have something to show for the millions of dollars that he had spent. Number to call if you want to enter in on this conversation is 888-589-8840. Let's go to Roger in Clarksville, Arkansas. Roger, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Brian. I just wanted to comment on this lying to Congress. I was thinking back when Eric Holder lied to Congress on the Fast and Furious.
Yes.
He resigned, yeah, but basically was given a hero's send-off, I'm sure with full benefits. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Brian.
Well, you got a good point on that. You know, and what it's highlighting here, Roger, is the double standard when it has to do with a Republican administration, a Republican president, and just a completely different set of standards. I mean, if Hillary Clinton had done what she did as a Republican, she would be behind bars right now. There's no way that the Democrats would have let her, if she was a Republican, get away with the stuff that she got away with. I mean, you had James Comey cutting her all kinds of slack. If she was a Republican, Democrats in charge, never would have happened. Same thing with Eric Holder. I mean, the whole Fast and Furious thing was a total boondoggle, flatly illegal. I mean, here is the Attorney General of the United States running guns into Mexico. Running guns into Mexico to try to get them in the hands of the Mexican drug cartels. And this, again, was all under the auspices of trying to catch these cartel guys doing something bad. What he was really trying to do is he was trying to convince the American people that we have to clamp down on guns. Look what's happened. Here a guy came and bought a gun in an American gun shop, took it across the border, and next thing we know, the Mexican cartel are killing people with it. So that's the scenario that Eric Holder was trying to set up, but he had to break the law to do it. And like Roger said, didn't pay a price for it, nor did James Comey. All right, that's what's going on up there. Let's go to Gerard in Tennessee. Gerard, welcome. What's on your mind? Number is 888-589-8840. Gerard, what's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I love listening to your show. I've been listening to the last 4 months just about every day. Why is there not a special counsel put together to investigate everything that's happened with the Clintons, with Bob Mueller. I mean, it's just like a rat race and a smokescreen that's going on.
Yeah. Well, you know, and there should be. And you've got Republican lawmakers now that are talking about this, Gerard. Now, I think, I'm not sure of the details. Somebody might be able to inform us about this, but I believe that the Department of Justice has to appoint a special prosecutor. And you only appoint a special prosecutor when it's not something that the FBI feels like they can pursue because of conflict of interest concerns or whatever. So then you go get a special prosecutor, somebody independent, somebody from the outside to come in. And I don't believe that Mueller was a good choice anyway because he was tight with Comey. They were best buds. No way. And Comey was definitely going to be a person of interest, maybe even a possible suspect in that. So Mueller never should have been appointed. That to me was an indication maybe the fix was in at the very beginning. So Gerard, I think the Department of Justice, this is something that Jeff Sessions, I think Jeff Sessions could do this. He would probably consult with the president. But I think the Department of Justice has to do this, and you know, a lot of lawmakers are thinking, how come? They're asking the same question you are, Gerard. How come something's not being done here? Here we got the good guys in charge of the FBI, people that believe in the rule of law, which Jeff Sessions does without question, people that are impartial, and maybe that's part of the issue. Jeff Sessions just has a hard time going after people that are former colleagues because he's such a Southern gentleman. I think that's probably cobbed him up on more than one occasion. But I think I'm with you, Gerard. There ought to be a special prosecutor to look into Hillary Clinton and the email snafu. There's no question about that. You know, the Fast and Furious merits a special prosecutor, and yet no indication that any of that is going to happen. All right, thanks for the call. Let's go to Roxanne, Franklin, Pennsylvania. Roxanne, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Well, this is just, it's a little bit abstract, but I started thinking with all of these sexual accusations coming back out of the woodwork for Trump now and for some of the other people. I'm wondering if the Harvey Weinstein was sort of the sacrificial lamb to sort of, you know, shoot the cannon out of the, you know, get it started, and now this is going to be their strategy to try to, you know, they tested it on Judge Roy Moore and it worked. So now it's going to be pulling these people out of the woodwork from years prior, you know, to levy these accusations and destroy the careers. And I'm also a little suspicious on the one that they just had, Portman or whatever, that they just ousted. That I feel like these wives, I think that they were probably tapped on the shoulder by somebody, and I'm a little suspicious that the new FBI director, Wray, you know, sort of had to come to the front to, you know, add a little fuel to the fire. And I wonder if he's still maybe part of the, you know, the undercurrent that was there as well.
Yeah. Well, it's possible, Roxanne. I'll tell you, I think the Michael Weinstein thing, I think that got away for them, frankly. That's my honest assessment, is they've been trying to cover, they had been with Michael Weinstein, they had been covering that stuff up for decades. And this one just got away from them. I don't think they intended for this to leak out and turn into full-blown scandal. But maybe they did. You could be right about that. But they clearly took advantage of it. And they thought, you know, we can get rid of Roy Moore. Look what it did to Weinstein when people thought that he'd done this. We can get rid of Roy Moore. You're exactly right. And it worked. And so, you know, and what they're doing with Porter, you know, my suspicion with Porter is that he's probably guilty, you know, given the photographs and the testimony of his wives. But again, we don't know. We have just a he said, she said thing at this point. And there's questions about the photograph, and he took it. Why would he take a photograph as his wife's own bruised face unless it was an accident? I mean, that adds a little credibility to his story. All right, thanks, Roxanne. Let's grab a call to end the hour from Kevin in Tennessee. Kevin, I got 30 seconds. No, I got 25 seconds. Hit me.
Can we get the log books and date books, and can we prove that these people in the meeting were somewhere else? Video camera surveillance.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want. I want somebody to poke into that. I'd like to see a journalist, first-rate journalist, poke into that, look into the meeting logs and their logs for all of these people, the meetings they were in, and see if they can find any discrepancies. Find some proof that James Comey, for instance, was somewhere else on January 5. We'll be right back after the news. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
You can stay up to date with the latest in the culture war from the news team at onenewsnow.com. Our goal is to present the day's news from a biblical perspective. OneNewsNow.com not only features the latest breaking stories from across the U.S. and around the world, but also news of the challenges that Christians face today. Bookmark OneNewsNow.com.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A federal official says the incident outside the National Security Agency's campus that led to gunfire and left several people hospitalized wasn't linked to terrorism. In a statement, the NSA says a vehicle tried to enter the spy agency's secure campus in Maryland without authorization shortly after 7 a.m. today. The immigration debate is officially underway in the Senate. Now, lawmakers must rush to find what can win enough votes to pass. Jared Halpern has more.
President Trump is endorsing a plan from several Republican senators that largely dovetails his framework laid out in the State of the Union.
The president has spelled out a fair and generous framework.
Republican leader Mitch McConnell also putting forward an amendment that would target so-called sanctuary cities. It's unlikely either approach will win a required 60 votes. Instead, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer says,
Democrats are focused like a laser on finding a bipartisan bill that can pass the Senate to protect the dreamers.
In the House, Republican leaders are taking the temperature on a measure preferred by conservatives. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
A controversial email written by former Obama aide Susan Rice has some analysts wondering just how much the former president knew about the FBI and Justice Department's activities regarding the Russian collusion controversy.
Senators have given Obama's ex-national security advisor until February 22nd to respond to their concerns about the unusual email she sent to herself on January 20, 2017, as the Obama administration left office. The email had to do with a January 5, 2017 high-level meeting that included former President Obama, then FBI Director James Comey, then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, and then Vice President Joe Biden and Rice, and documented Obama's guidance about how law enforcement should investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential race. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley and Senator Lindsey Graham revealed the discovery of the email. Gary Bauer of the Campaign for Working Families says the email is quite disturbing.
There's growing evidence that these operatives in the White House, the Justice, the FBI, the State Department, were attempting to destroy the incoming administration. So it's disturbing to see this latest example, and I will be very interested to see whether Ms. Rice responds to the questions posed to her by Senator Graham.
Abraham Hamilton III is General Counsel and Public Policy Analyst at the American Family Association.
It seems to me that it smacks of an attempt to revise history on the part of Susan Rice. It gives me a very keen sensation that President Obama may know more than he has represented as having known when you see Susan Rice working so diligently to make sure he appears as having his hands clean.
I'm Chad Groening.
Individuals are not the only ones expressing support for artistic freedom of Minnesota filmmakers, Chris Woodward explains.
The U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit has received several friend of the court briefs, including one filed by 10 states in support of the artistic freedom of Carl and Angel Larson, owner of Telescope Media Group. The filmmakers are challenging the Minnesota Human Rights Act, saying it requires them to use their talents to promote same-sex marriages if they produce films that celebrate marriage between one man and one woman. Violators of the law face fines and jail time. The Larsons asked a federal district court for an injunction that would suspend enforcement of the law against them while their case proceeds. The court denied that request and instead ruled in favor of the state's motion to dismiss the lawsuit. ADF attorney Jeremy Tedesco represents the Larsons.
The state doesn't have any interest whatsoever in threatening filmmakers with fines and even jail time simply because they declined to create films that violate their beliefs. Yet that's what the district court said Minnesota had the power to do.
The 10 states that filed briefs in support of the Larsons are Alabama, Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, and West Virginia. I'm Chris Woodward.
And consumers are seeing signs of inflation. The Labor Department says consumer prices rose 0.5% in January, the most in 4 months. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, prices rose 0.3% last month, the most in a year. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
This is Tim Armstrong from the Worthy Walk radio program, inviting you to join us as we study the scriptures verse by verse each day, Monday through Friday at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, here on American Family Radio. We will study the Word of God and learn to apply its truths to our lives each day. The Worthy Walk, Monday through Friday at 6:30 p.m. Central Time on American Family Radio.
We're not going to make any revisions to it. The only question is what redactions will be made.
This idea that Nunes could be charged with obstruction is facially absurd. They're expanding the definition of crimes like obstruction.
So we know that Hillary Clinton goes to run for president, and she's got the full weight and strength and power of the U.S. government behind her.
The collusion is right in front of our eyes.
And she's still lost.
As attorneys, we have an obligation to try to be objective, and it doesn't mean that you have to like the president or dislike the president, but we have a service to the public.
I find it obscene, the phrase chain migration.
Chain migration has to be stopped. Chain migration.
Chain migration.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. I want to invite you to live stream us on Facebook. And by the way, active discussion going on the live stream page. There's room there for a discussion. We got a discussion, kind of a mini debate going on there. Room for you to weigh in with your comments and interact with others that are viewing. That's the live stream on Facebook. Go to Focal Point Brian Fisher on your Facebook search bar. It'll pop right up. By the way, Facebook declining in the number of young people that are using it. Older people are gravitating to it. Young people say, I don't want to do that. That's what my grandparents use. So they're gravitating toward Instagram or Snapchat. But Instagram now has become the new Facebook. That's where they're migrating to. And even Zuckerberg said, look, there are 50 million hours a day less usage of Facebook than there was just a month ago. Wow. Remember, they've tried to get away from controversial stories. They're trying to go back to Facebook being a place where people can connect with their friends. They were going the big, heavy news route, getting news stories up there, getting your news feed. They were going to curate stories for you and all that. They wound up just getting a whole bunch of fake news stuff out there. It was just more hassle than they wanted, so they've tried to shift the focus of it back to people personally connecting with their friends and family and so forth, and young people just kind of tuning it out. They don't want to do something that their grandparents are doing. Anyway, I want to just close the loop on this deal with Michael Flynn. Very possible, like he didn't do anything wrong, did not lie to the FBI, that all of that was, he just pled guilty to save what was left of his bank account, which was rapidly diminishing by the day. Mueller just hounded him into a guilty plea. Only option he had. Maybe he thought that maybe Mueller had his son in his crosshairs and would go easy on his son if he pled guilty and kind of made himself the personal scapegoat, whatever. But Flynn's out of the picture, and Mueller did not get a conviction he was looking for. In fact, Andy McCarthy said, look, after Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI, what McCarthy said, look, this showed that Mueller did not have a collusion case. Because if he had, he would have gotten Flynn to plead guilty to some kind of criminal conspiracy involving the Trump campaign and Russia. Because then he could use that to implicate his co-conspirators. But Flynn didn't do it. He just confessed to something that he himself had done, not in collusion or connection with anybody, just lying to the FBI. So that proved to Andy McCarthy, look, that there was no collusion or conspiracy crime here that Mueller found. So that whole collusion thing is turning out to be an absolute dry hole. Now, one other thing has to do with, where is that information, is with the judge that accepted the guilty plea from Michael Flynn. I'm taking maybe more time on this than you want me to, but I'm interested in it, so indulge me for a few more minutes. The judge that accepted Michael Flynn's guilty plea was a guy by the name of Rudolph Contreras. And just days after he accepted Flynn's plea, he recused himself from the case, said, I'm out of here. And the press has shown no curiosity about what happened to him. There's no rationale that was given for this. Usually when somebody recuses himself, there's a reason given, gave no reason. In fact, the indication is he might have been recused. This might not have been his idea. Somebody above him might have come, I mean, maybe even the Chief Justice of the United States, because he's the one that is over the FISA court. Maybe John Roberts came to him and said, look, you got to step down here. You got to recuse yourself, because he just recused himself with no explanation. And he waited till after the guilty plea to do it. Now, Contreras is one of the 11 federal district judges that's assigned to the FISA court. So he's one of the judges that may have signed one or more of the FISA warrants. And he was in the District of Columbia. So he very likely would have been one of the judges that could have signed a FISA warrant on the Trump-Russia thing or something like that. So he may have been a FISA judge that signed one of these warrants or was asked to sign one of these warrants. Now, when he pulled out, the case was reassigned to a judge by the name of Emmett Sullivan. Now, here's what's interesting, to me anyway. One of Judge Sullivan's first actions on this case was to file an order directing Mueller to provide Flynn with any evidence in the special counsel's possession that is favorable to Flynn, whether on the issue of guilt or of sentencing. And the order stresses that if Mueller has such evidence but believes it is not material, and therefore Flynn is not entitled to disclosure of it, Mueller still has to show the evidence to the court, and Judge Sullivan will decide whether to mandate its disclosure. Now, this is odd because Flynn had already pled guilty, and he'd agreed to Mueller's demand that he waive the right to any further discovery or disclosures of information. He'd waived that right. And Sullivan came back and mandated that Mueller do this anyway, even though Flynn had waived his right. So it looks like Sullivan is kind of suspicious here that maybe Mueller was holding out on Flynn. Maybe he had evidence that would tend to militate on behalf of Flynn's innocence in the trial phase, the guilty phase, or in the sentencing phase, whatever. And he was under a court order now to bring that information forward. Now, that's supposed to be, it's all discovery. You see that on TV all the time. It's supposed to be discovery where the prosecution has to show you all the evidence they've got. So maybe this Judge Sullivan believes that maybe Mueller was kind of holding out a little bit and kept some information that would have been relevant or important to have. By the way, Susan Yates was the acting Attorney General, not the acting head of the FBI. I think I misspoke, and one of our listeners were alert enough to catch that. She was the acting Attorney General at that point. And those that were in the meeting on January 5 were Obama, James Comey, Vice President Joe Biden, Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, and then Susan Rice. So anyway, we'll see if anybody wants to pursue that. Some enterprising reporter can pursue that. So again, it's just interesting to me that the judge that's now in charge of these cases ordered the special prosecutor Mueller to cough up any information that might be relevant. Says you can't even make the judgment whether it's material or not. You got to show me everything. You don't get to make the judgment that it's material and not hand it over. You got to hand me everything, even if you think it's not material, and I will be the one who decides whether the information is material or not. You know what's odd to me about this supposed January 5th conversation? I've got somewhere in here the actual text of the email, what Susan Rice said. I'm going to have to paraphrase it here, but it was just very emphatic. According to Susan Rice, President Obama was very emphatic that this investigation had to be done by the book. Everything had to be done by the book. You know, and the odd thing to me is, what are they doing talking about this on January 5? He's out of office in 2 weeks. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
It's Valentine's Day and Wedge of Freedom Wednesday, so let me invite you to build a relationship with your doctor. In most clinics today, that's difficult. Sometimes you can't even see your own doctor. To find that relationship, go to jointhewedge.com. If we don't yet have a clinic listed near you, Google direct pay, self-pay, or direct primary care. And at your appointment, invite the clinic to join the Wedge so that we can help other patients find it. Build a relationship now with a doctor who will spend time with you and your family and be there when you need someone in your corner. Whether you're sick at home, in the hospital, or out of state, go to jointhewedge.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Today, moral relativism and political correctness are assaulting truth. How can the world have hope when believers themselves aren't clear on the authority of the Bible?
The Church of Jesus Christ always faces a tremendous temptation to deviate from the Word of God.
The God who speaks clearly expresses God's intent in giving us His Word, and the response that is demanded of those who hear.
Nobody ever encounters God and says, that was boring and irrelevant. When people say that about the Bible, it just says to me they've not encountered the God of the Bible.
Our faith is rooted in history, and consequently we need to use the evidence and never be afraid of it.
The God Who Speaks is a feature-length documentary from the American Family Association, which could bolster your confidence in the Word of God.
Churches really need to see this, really need to understand what the Bible actually is.
Available now at thegodwhospeaks.org.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Let's see if we have some sound bites here. I haven't refreshed my familiarity with our soundbite roster here that may have to do with all of this. Let's look at clip number 1. You got Devin Nunes kind of in the crosshairs now for Democrats. He's the one that has been exploring all this FISA memo stuff and doing a pretty good job of exposing some of the hinky stuff that's going on with this. And George Washington law professor Jonathan Turley, he's on Fox News Channel's The Story. And what he's observing here is the way this idea of obstruction of justice as a possible charge, the way this thing is kind of growing like the blob and expanding to apply to more and more people. Kind of a sign of desperation, I think, is what he's suggesting. Let's listen to clip number 1.
It seems like the circle of people that can be charged, according to many of these experts, is widening exponentially by the day. And it's all because they're expanding the definition of crimes like obstruction. And it's part of the distemper of our politics. You know, this idea that Nunes could be charged with obstruction is facially absurd. And if you take a look at that article, I think it misuses historical sources and it takes radical departures from the case law. But the thing that I'm most concerned with is how this mania has become so mainstream. You know, as attorneys, we have an obligation to try to be objective, and it doesn't mean that you have to like the president or dislike the president, but we have a service to the public to try to get things right, to say what is in the realm of possibility.
That's exactly
this isn't.
right.
And this isn't. So this mania has become mainstream. You know, and that's true. It's just like there's this fever swamp in D.C., and this stuff that's completely irrational starts taking on a life of its own. This whole business about obstruction of justice. We've talked about this at length, that Donald Trump cannot be charged with obstruction of justice for firing James Comey. Cannot happen because he's James Comey's boss. He can fire him without having to explain that to anybody. Now here, clip number 2 is Maria Bartiromo talking to Devin Nunes, the one now that the Democrats are trying to insinuate may have been guilty of obstruction of justice by telling the truth about all of this. Here's Maria Bartiromo talking to him.
Incredible. So we know that Hillary Clinton goes to run for president, and she's got the full weight and strength and power of the U.S. government behind her, where FBI and other agencies are to make sure she wins, and she still lost. This is just an extraordinary story.
And not only that, Maria, but I'd also add that the collusion is right in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
Right? People, just because you hire a lawyer who hires a firm, who hires a former British spy to make contacts with Russians, that means that you were colluding with the Russians.
Right. That's called collusion.
Okay?
Yeah. Collusion and corruption
that's called
at the
collusion,
top of the FBI.
And nobody's looking at that.
So he's saying, look, this collusion is right in front of our faces. The DNC hiring a lawyer who in turn hires a firm that puts the British spy in contact with whom? With people in Russia. So who is colluding with the Russians to try to impact the presidential election? It's Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and the Democratic Party. And Devin Nunes said, look, nobody's looking at that. Maybe somebody ought to. Maybe somebody in the Department of Justice, Jeff Sessions. Now, Cheryl Atkinson, great reporter, clip number 3 here. She's a great reporter. She got fired by CBS, or left CBS, I forget which, because she had some groundbreaking reporting on Benghazi, and CBS did not want to air it. It's good reporting, excellent journalism, and it turns out that the head of CBS News is the brother of the guy who was the national security advisor under Barack Obama, and the whole Benghazi thing made everybody in the intelligence apparatus look really bad. Cheryl Atkinson's report would have made Ben Rhodes look bad, and so his brother, head of CBS News, spiked it, wouldn't let it run. Anyway, here is a story that she filed on this FBI business.
But there's a conflict of interest. It's the FBI that secretly used Steele's dossier to justify wiretapping a former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page. The FBI and Justice Department's own conduct is under congressional investigation.
Hello.
They allegedly didn't tell the judge who approved the wiretaps that some of their evidence was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Even more problematic, the FBI may have violated strict rules, Woods procedures, that forbid it from presenting even a single unverified fact to the special court for a wiretap, let alone a lengthy dossier full of them. Top Obama and Trump officials signed 4 wiretap applications, relying in part on the dossier, starting a month before the election.
Do you swear the testimony you will give?
Those signing wiretaps included then FBI Director James Comey, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who has stepped down amid controversy, then Attorney General Sally Yates, who was later fired by President Trump, FBI General Counsel Dana Boente, who was Deputy Attorney General at the time, and current Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Can the agencies and officials who signed the controversial wiretap applications fairly investigate the source of their questioned evidence?
So that's the question that she's asking here. You look at the people that signed the extensions on these surveillance applications, and they're all based on this dossier, which doesn't have anything verified in it. Even James Comey admitted that the whole thing is salacious and unverified, and yet the Woods procedures, which apply to these FISA applications, prohibit the FBI from presenting even one single solitary unverified fact to the special court for a surveillance warrant. And this whole thing, all 35 pages, consisted of unverified assertions. James Comey signed one of the FISA warrant applications. He's gone under less than favorable circumstances. Andrew McCabe had to resign in grace. He signed the second one. Sally Yates had to get fired for insubordination for the third one. And then Rod Rosenstein signed the last one. And I've got my suspicions about Rod Rosenstein. I think he's responsible to supervise Bob Mueller, and I don't think he has the whatever it takes to do it. You know, Mueller's a pretty imposing guy. He was FBI director for a long time. He was above Rod Rosenstein on the pecking order in the FBI for a long time. He's a whole lot bigger than Rod Rosenstein. I just don't think there's any way Rod Rosenstein is going to find it in his way to tell Bob Mueller to stop doing something or start doing something else. Now, here is Adam Schiff. You know, they got a controversy over the memo that they prepared, and we'll talk about that in a second after we hear the soundbite from Adam Schiff about the memo. There was questions about whether the Democrats were going to change it. There's a lot of information in it that apparently needs to be redacted. What are you going to do about that? And the FBI, the Adam Schiff, remember, made no attempt over the weekend. Made no attempt over the weekend to spruce up the memo, to evaluate it, to get somebody to look at it, decide what needed to be redacted. They just went home and played golf all weekend. So here is Adam Schiff talking about it.
We're not going to make any revisions to it. The only question is what redactions will be made. And obviously we'd like to keep those to a minimum. The White House has a different interest. I think their interest is in redacting anything that doesn't reflect well in the White House.
All right, and I think this is all deliberate. I suspected this from the very beginning, that the reason for this Democrat memo, and by the way, all of the Republicans on that committee voted to release this to the public. They said, we're fine with this going to the public. It's got to be scrutinized for anything that would compromise national security, sources and methods and all that. But we vote to release this thing to the public. Remember, not one Democrat voted to release the Republican memo, the Nunes memo, but the Republicans said, look, we want transparency. We want the American people to have this information. We all voted for it. But we suspected at the time that the Democrats, Adam Schiff, that they were going to load this memo up with so much secret information, so much classified information, that it could not be released without being heavily redacted. And then, and it would wind up not being released at all. And then Adam Schiff would say, hey, look, what are the Republicans trying to hide? Look at all the stuff they're redacting from this memo. What is it that they do not want the public to see? How come the memo that you're getting has all these black smudges on it? What is it that the Republicans are hiding? I don't think the Democrats ever intended for this memo to see the light of day. I think their plan was to sabotage and put a bunch of these IEDs in this memo so it never would see the light of day.
And Brian, did you find it a little ironic that the Democrats were remember when they were getting ready to release the first memo and they were saying, you can't do that, it's national security, you can't do that, and now they want to release their own memo that has all that classified information in it. It's kind of quite a shift in message.
Yeah, and in tactics and all of that.
Yeah.
By the way, just a couple of more data points on President Trump. His approval rating, I mentioned this earlier, his approval rating is breaking even after he's been underwater for 9 months, and now his approval rating is even, 47-47, lowest disapproval mark since late April. Now, the generic ballot, this is another kind of bombshell piece of information. The generic ballot, like forever, has favored Democrats. They just ask people, who would you rather vote for, Democrat or Republican? They always say Democrat. But for the first time since November, and one of the rare times really in recent history, on the generic ballot, there are more people, 39% say that they would rather vote Republican, and only 38% say they would vote Democrat. So this is very much of a surprise that the Republicans are now edging ahead in the generic ballot. That's bad news for the Democrats and their hope for some kind of a blue wave next fall. 60% of voters say Dreamers should be allowed to say they're having a big fracas on Capitol Hill about immigration. And again, it's over the Dreamers. What's going to be done with the Dreamers? The Republican bill, the one that President Trump favors, is the Grassley bill that would provide amnesty for 1.8 million Dreamers or DACA recipients. And remember, the DACA recipients, there's only 900,000, those are 700,000 actually. But what the Democrats wanted is to boost that to 1.8 million, which would make a provision for people that are illegal aliens, but just never got around to signing up for DACA. They were too lazy, they weren't interested or whatever. Now they get a second bite of the apple they can go back now after all the deadlines have passed, and they can apply for amnesty, and they will get it, 1.8 million. And that's the one thing that the Democrats, well, they're balking at the wall. I think what they're balking at is they do not want any restrictions on immigration whatsoever for Dreamers or anybody else. And so their justification is going to be, we do not want the wall. We think the wall is racist. We think the wall is unnecessary. Sends the wrong signal to the world. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll be right back with more content. Stay with us.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining MediShare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. MediShare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join MediShare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a non-profit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Talking a little bit about the immigration issue. Donald Trump supporting the bill that Chuck Grassley came up with, and he's got Tom Cotton on that team. And no, it's not a bad bill. The Goodlatte bill is the one we want. That's the one in the House. But that is right down the line with what Donald Trump said we want. It only provides amnesty for the DACA recipients themselves, just the 700,000, no more. It builds the wall, provides $25 billion for building the wall, puts it in an escrow account. It gets rid of chain migration. That's gone. As racist as it is, that's gone. And the visa lottery is gone. That's out of here. So all that's in the Goodlatte bill. The bill that Chuck Grassley came up with does some of those things, kind of. But it's a half measure at best. But at least it will eventually bring an end to chain migration. Doesn't say anything about E-Verify, which would be the most effective thing you could do to close off illegals from taking jobs that Americans otherwise would be able to do. And it doubles the number of people that would be eligible for amnesty. Now, here is Bob Menendez, clip 5. And I've got, this is Bob Menendez, and we've been talking about this for the last several days, this term chain migration. And I remember we had played somebody yesterday, I don't even remember who it was, but he was just ringing the rafters on the fact that maybe it was a female, I forget who it was, but some lawmaker. This is obscene. This phrase, chain migration, it's obscene, it's vulgar, it's racist. No person who's not an idiot. Was it Nancy Pelosi?
It was Gutierrez and several. Ramos, maybe.
Jorge Ramos? Well, no, we're going to see, this is what's interesting to me, is we're going to hear Jorge Ramos talk about this. But here's Bob Menendez, clip 5. Listen to the term that Bob Menendez uses.
I find it obscene, the phrase chain migration. It is incredibly cruel to those whose ancestors were brought to this country in chains in slavery. It is a dehumanizing element of what is, in essence, family reunification.
All right, so that's Bob Menendez saying this term is obscene, chain migration. It is obscene. It is not just cruel, but it is incredibly cruel to those whose ancestors were brought to this country in chains of slavery. It is dehumanizing.
I'm interested in this. All right, they're the ones just harping on this chain migration. Well, the Republicans want to take the chain migration off the table. Right. So why don't they just...
ought to be supporting that.
Yeah, that's right.
You're against chain migration, then go with the Republicans. They want to get rid of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So. I mean, and you really have to be... it kind of has to be in you to even hear that as a slave thing. Yeah. You know, it just doesn't... No rational person would think that they're talking about slavery by that term.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to Jorge Ramos and an exchange with Anderson Cooper. I just had Rob grab one sentence out of each of what these guys had to say, but listen to this because it will strike you. I mean, I just had no idea how many blatantly and obscenely, outrageously racist anchors that we had at these left-wing networks. Here's Jorge Ramos. He's the main anchor for Univision, which is a Spanish-speaking network, and then Anderson Cooper, Mr. PC himself. Let's listen, Jorge Ramos and then Anderson Cooper.
But to tell them that from now on, everything's going to change, that chain migration has to be stopped.
To those in the Republican Party who are talking about chain migration and see it as an issue and talk about merit-based immigration.
Well, there you go. There's Jorge Ramos talking about chain migration, using a term, according to Bob Menendez, that's obscene, incredibly cruel, and dehumanizing. And then Anderson Cooper uses the same term, chain migration, apparently unaware that he was doing something obscene, incredibly cruel, and dehumanizing. Now let's see if I got anything else on the immigration front that I want to get to you. By the way, this is something that is important. There's another federal tin-pot judge who ordered restoration of the DACA program. Again, this is another judge who is arrogating to himself the authority which the Constitution does not give him in any way, shape, or form to take charge of America's immigration policy. But he's ordering this whole DACA program, which Donald Trump shut down, and he said it's going to go completely out of existence on March 5, and a federal judge says, no, you're not, over my dead body. Now, again, this is usurpation of power, violation of the separation of powers. The judge said the administration does have the power to revoke DACA, but it must give a sound reason for doing so. Where is that written? Anywhere. Where is it written that the administration must give a sound reason for revoking DACA? So he's just making that up completely on the fly. So again, this is something that a judge has no right to do. And again, I believe that Donald Trump and his administration should just ignore this. Just ignore this judge's ruling as something that has no legal force. By the way, Democrats, speaking of the Democrats for the moment, they want Bill Clinton to stay as far away from their campaigns this fall as it is possible for him to get because of all of the sexual misconduct stuff that's flying around. They want to demonize Bob Porter. Bob Porter said, I didn't do it. Donald Trump says, well, let's not forget, he said he's innocent. And so they're blasting Donald Trump for saying that this guy is innocent. So they're going after Rob Porter, even though he's already resigned. He's already out of the White House. They're still going after him. I don't know what they want to do, flay him, hang him from a lamppost. I don't know what they want to do. What more could you do to him? But the point is the Democrats want to keep this alive as an issue. If Bill Clinton campaigns for them, you know, and he did a lot of places. 8 years ago, he made 100 campaign appearances for Democrats during the 2010 midterms. And he, I think, probably was prepared to do it again And the Democrats have made it very clear they don't want him within miles of their campaigns. Now, let's go to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice. This is clip number 7, and she's talking about the Hillary Clinton campaign, her own self.
I think it was difficult for Hillary Clinton to get by even the macho atmosphere prevailing during that campaign. And she was criticized in a way I think no man would have been criticized.
All right, so she said, look, I think sexism played a part in Hillary Clinton's losing. There is a macho atmosphere that she had to run against that was prevailing during the campaign, she says. I don't know where she's getting that idea. And she was criticized in a way that I think no man would have been criticized. I mean, what world was she living in? Did she not see what the media did to Donald Trump? I mean, that guy was savaged in a way that no candidate for the presidency has ever been savaged. They would have treated Dick Nixon better if he tried to come back and run after he'd resigned from office. So RBG, again, you know, and this makes you wonder about her impartiality. Because the reality is, and her objectivity, and that's an important quality in a Supreme Court justice, is it not? That judge be able to set aside their personal predilections or personal preferences in order to render impartial judgment. But you know, the reality is we did not object to Hillary Clinton because of her gender or her sex. It was her politics that we objected to. It was her character. It was her conduct that we had problems with. It wasn't her gender. We didn't object to her because she was a woman. We rejected to her because she was an inveterate liar who was a fraud and a liberal. Had nothing to do with her sex. Now, Jeff Sessions will shift from sexism to racism. Jeff Sessions makes a comment in this soundbite for which he has received an enormous amount of criticism. By the way, Ruth Bader Ginsburg says that she received criticism that no woman would have gotten. There was a lot of sexism. More women voted for Trump than voted for Hillary. Trump won the women's vote, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. All right, here's Jeff Sessions committing a racist crime.
Since our founding, the independently elected sheriff has been the people's protector, who keeps law enforcement close to and accountable to people through the elective process. The office of sheriff is a critical part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. We must never erode this historic office.
The Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. He has been pilloried. He has been blasted, accused of being a racist. But unfortunately for him, you know who used it more than Jeff Sessions has ever used it? Barack Obama. Barack Obama used this term, Anglo-American tradition, heritage of law enforcement. He used this a number of times his own self. This is a standard term, standard legal term for the Anglo-American, the combination of English law and American law. The Anglo there stands for England. Anglo-American law. We took the best of English law. We blended it with our own philosophy of governance. We came up with a law system that shares a lot of similarities with the English system of law. And so it's just a standard part. I mean, every first-year law student learns this terminology, but everybody else was calling this loud white supremacy rhetoric. People criticizing it's a dog whistle and all that kind of stuff. But Charles C. Cook, who is an editor at National Review, says the term is not at all racist. Rather, it's a reference to principles otherwise known as common law that include ideals such as presumption of innocence and due process, ideals that are unique to Western culture and are laid out in early law that is common to both the United Kingdom and the United States. Barack Obama said it as far back as 2006. Barack Obama, I hope we remember that I sincerely hope we can protect what has been called the Great Writ, a writ that has been in place in the Anglo-American legal system for over 700 years. He said later, calling it the foundation of Anglo-American law, that's a quote, he said the principle is you have the right, if government grabs you, why was I grabbed? That is from Anglo-American law. 888-589-8840 if you want to join the conversation. 888-589-8840. Give us a call.
Is life more than just chemicals and compounds? Can the answers to life's deeper questions be found in science or maybe religion? Ravi Zacharias speaks to these questions as he takes a deeper look at the meaning of life on this week's Let My People Think.
Let My People Think, Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Hello everyone, I'm Tim Wildman, President of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We still have seats available for our September tours of Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg. Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon, that's one tour. And then Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, that is a separate tour. Now, we put them back to back so you can do both. If you're flying in from Texas or Montana or California or wherever you may be coming from, so that you can do those tours back to back with us if that's something you so choose to do. Now, Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be with us all along the way as our historian. Stephen will add context, he'll answer questions, talk about the people, the places, the events that make up our early American history. So for more information on this Spiritual Heritage Tour, go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. spiritualheritagetours.com for the September tour information.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
All right, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Last segment of the program today. We'll take your phone calls. One quick soundbite to squeeze in. This is Stephen Moore, a very accomplished economist. And he was on a program with Austin Goolsbee, who was, I think he was Secretary of the Treasury under Barack Obama. Anyway, Austin Goolsbee, one of these guys, no debt was too high, no amount of spending was too much. And Goolsbee's on there trying to shred Donald Trump, and Stephen Moore has a rebuttal for him, clip R1.
First of all, for Austin to talk about the debt, with all due respect, Austin, I mean, you worked for the president who took our debt from $10 to $20 trillion. So come on. I mean, Obama was the king of borrowing. And look, I'm not defending what Republicans are doing here. I think a pox on both their houses. But the other point is, look, the tax cut is working. A big increase in growth. We're seeing businesses come home. The new Fed report says that we might grow 5% this quarter. That never happened under Obama, that kind of growth. Look, it's all about jobs and the economy, getting it moving. I don't believe that more government spending is good for the economy, but I do think this tax cut is really revved up growth in a big way. 70% of Americans today rank the American economy as good or great.
So that's Stephen Moore just blowing the typical arguments from the left kind of out of the tub. And by the way, he's saying, I'm not crazy about everything in the budget. I'm not either. The new budget would bail out Obamacare. I don't know if you knew that. They have these things called risk corridors that are illegal. And yet this budget appropriates $11.5 billion for those risk corridors. This is something from the very beginning was supposed to be temporary. It's now against the law. And yet here the Republicans are going right out and doing it. Now, one other comment before we go to the phones, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Difference between the way the Associated Press reports on a $4 trillion spending plan when it's Obama's spending plan, and a $4 trillion budget when it is Trump's spending plan. Here's what they said when Obama proposed a $4 trillion spending plan. Obama sends $4 trillion spending plan to Congress, pledging help for the middle class. 2016, they said Obama sends record $4.1 trillion spending plan to Congress to combat terror threats and global warming. Now, when Donald Trump sent over a $4.4 trillion budget, this is what they said, what AP said. President Trump sends Congress $4.4 trillion spending plan that features soaring deficits. All right, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's begin with Jesse in Bird Eye, Arkansas. Jesse, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, I'm just wondering, with all this stuff of these here FBI memos coming out and all that, they see everything is 100% hoax. It was all false, but yet we still got Mueller and 26 or 27 other lawyers wasting American taxpayer money. Why in the world do they not stop this mess?
Well, it's a good question, and that's a question for Jeff Sessions and for Donald Trump, because they're the two people that could actually fire Bob Mueller. Well, I think Jeff Sessions would have to go to Trump for permission to do it, but Donald Trump can fire. Bob Mueller works for him. I mean, the special counsel is not independent; it's part of the executive branch, temporary kind of assignment. But Donald Trump's his boss. If he's like, you're wasting millions of dollars, you got nothing here. You've got no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion or any other collusion for that matter. I'm going to shut you down. Now, Donald Trump could do that. The blowback would be fierce. I'm afraid that he thinks that the blowback is not worth the risk. Jeff Sessions probably thinks the same thing, but probably both of them are just thinking, the political blowback would be so severe, I'm just going to let it ride out. And maybe they think it'll be good for me in the end because they'll just look so bad in chasing this mirage of this collusion. All right, Jesse, that's a very good question. Let's grab a call from Steve in Little Rock, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. By the way, another school shooting in Florida, I believe, something like 44 victims, Jeff, and one fatality.
Judge is reporting 20 to 50.
20 to 50, and I think we heard one fatality, and another one in Florida. All right, let's go to Steve in Little Rock. Steve, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, doing good, man. I hope you're having a great day, too, brother. I just had two quick deals. One was, when is Jeff Sessions going to unrecuse himself? Because ever since they did that way back there, I think they had that was a plot right there just to get him neutered out of the way where he don't have any input or anything to really, he can't really kick his feet up and get anything going.
Yeah.
And he can't run nobody off that's in office. And then the other thing I wanted to share is out there on the West Coast, that 9th District, every time they balk at something that Trump does, well, he has to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get that thing overdone. And once they overturn it, I think those federal judges out there, after about the second or third time they get overturned, they ought to lose their dadgum jobs because they know exactly what they're doing, and it don't bother them that they get overturned. They're just going to do it again the next time.
Yeah. Well, you got a point there, Steve, and I appreciate what you're saying. And Steve is actually right about Jeff Sessions. He recused himself from all of the investigations that have anything to do with Russia's involvement in the election. So he has to stay out of this thing. It'd have to be Donald Trump, Rod Rosenstein could do something about it, but he's not going to do, not going to do anything. Well, and Steve, I've suggested from the beginning, when these judges do something that they have no constitutional warrant to do, I think President Trump should just start ignoring their rulings. Andrew Jackson said back in the 19th century, the Supreme Court, the justice has issued his ruling, now let him enforce it. Because he knew that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has no law enforcement powers. There's nobody he can send out to arrest anybody. So he said, he's got no enforcement powers, I got nothing to fear from him. That's exactly right. If Trump just decided to ignore it, because none of the people in the Department of in the executive branch work for the Supreme Court. They all work for the president. So if he gives them an order, they got to go out and do it. If he gives them an order, look, you're going to follow my orders. We're going to ignore what the Supreme Court has done. Who is going to stop him? Now, of course, the president has to be sure that he does it where there is a clear violation of the Constitution. That's what you have here, because there is nothing in the Constitution that gives a court any right to weigh in on immigration issues. None. All right, let's go to Chris in Kansas. Chris in Kansas, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Brian, Chris, and, Chris and Nancy. Anyway, I'm on the app, and the first thing to talk about is on that chain migration. And I thought of another term. We could say concatenated migration. Of course, it means the same thing, but it's a term we've used in theology. And so I was thinking that if that's a really bad term, then just use concatenated migration, and then they won't have any problems with it.
Yeah, and then
you'd enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Then their eyes would just kind of roll back in their heads. What does concatenated mean? And then you could spend some time explaining the theological significance of it. By the time you got done with that, they'd have forgotten all about what the conversation was even about. So a very good idea, Chris. Get them completely confused and off topic at the same time. That's a good idea. I like it. Let's go to Ron in Columbus, Ohio. Ron, welcome. What's on your mind?
Oh, Brian, you got me started with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I could go all afternoon, but I'll keep it brief. Number one, we've got statistics now about the media against Donald Trump being like 20-1 versus the negatives against Hillary. So that blows that out of the water. Number two, her and Elena Kagan had officiated gay weddings and still would not recuse themselves when they sat on the bench during Obergefell. I happened to stumble across on C-SPAN one night when I was channel surfing her original, when they had first nominated her for the bench, and she was up in front of the Congress, and she made it quite clear that she felt like that the Supreme Court had a responsibility to fill in all the blanks that the founders had left out of our Constitution.
Yeah.
I could not believe it. So like I said, I could go on, but I will defer to somebody else to call. Thank
all
you.
right. Well, I appreciate that, Ron. Those are very insightful comments. Let's go to Buddy in Texas. Buddy, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Thank you. DACA is not really a problem. DACA is the result of a problem, and the problem is term limitations. I mean, we have a Congress that's been elected for 30 years, which is the results of a 30-year Dreamer program, and we have to fix the problem in order to fix the results of a problem, which is DACA. You can't get rid of a continuing DACA situation unless you fix the problem of immigration. And term limits would ratify all of the above.
Would take care of it?
When you have a Congress.
You think term limits would take care of that problem?
Well, you have career politicians that have been there for 30 years, and we have dreamers that are 30 years old that are the results of a problem that our Congress hasn't addressed in the past 30 years.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could believe that the term limits would do it, buddy. I'm not quite as optimistic as you are. It's amazing how quickly these people convert to swamp rats when they get to D.C. We've had a lot of people that we sent them to D.C. as Tea Partiers. We're going to go get control of the budget. Some of these guys voted for this monstrous budget we're now stuck with. Hi, buddy. I appreciate it. I sure appreciate the sentiment for term limits. A lot of us would like to see something like that happen. All right, well, that is it for today. A couple of quick things. St. Valentine was a true guy. He actually lived. He got in trouble because the emperor at the time did not want his soldiers getting married. He thought they'd fight better if they didn't have families that they were worried about back home. Now, St. Valentine believed in the sanctity of marriage, so he was marrying these soldiers on the sly. Emperor found out about it and put him to death. And the last thing that Valentine said, or wrote, he sent a little note to the daughter of one of the soldiers, "From your Valentine," and that's where St. Valentine's Day came from. Here is one of the sickest things you're going to read about. Here's a guy that took a drug. He's a male transgender. He's a male. Took some drugs, very dangerous drugs for babies because it's transmitted through the mother's milk. Took a lactation drug. He's now breastfeeding his baby, and the drugs could kill the baby.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/thestand.